Hey guys, welcome to a fresh video here on the Blue Abroad YouTube channel. Today I want to continue the discussion around Tom De Koning and his contract, and I've seen both sides of the argument, which you're going to see shortly thanks to some contributors into the mainstream media. And I guess that I wanted to pose the question, as the title suggests, what's he worth? What is Tom De Koning worth? We're going to take a look at what he's worth potentially on the open market. We're going to take a look at what he's worth to Carlton, look through his story, look through his 2024 season, and have a bit of a discussion below as to where we think this one will eventuate. Now, we all remember Tom, drafted with pick 30 in the 2017 national draft. That is a draft that has gone down in history now as one that we just didn't quite get right, particularly when you consider that we had two picks in the top 10 and 7 years later, both of those picks are no longer at the club, but Tom De Koning saved the day. So pick 30, we saw his journey from the very beginning. He's grown up right before our eyes. We saw, the declaration of him being part of the spine when we were watching, really following the early stages of a lot of these boys. And, it took a few years. We knew that with rucks in particular, there would be a bit more time that's needed. I think that's generally the case with all key position players and taller players, generally speaking, given their bodies grow at a different rate. You need to put on a little bit more strength to compete with the other big boys around the league who are already established men. So he's gone through this really interesting journey. He gets through. I thought he started showing signs he's probably 2020. I remember flashes of signs against Nick Natanui, flashes of signs against Brodie Grundy, who, at the time, two of the premier rucks in the competition. I think we've all spoken about when we started seeing that elevation take place. So he went from flashes and then he went to, okay, can we rely on him in key moments? And I think we saw that in the 2023 semi-final against the D's. Harry Mackay didn't play. Charlie played, was getting double teamed. We just needed somebody to step up, and he did. And he kicked a couple of goals and got us going. And then I think 2024 was a really interesting year for him. Start of the year, there's that discussion, not only amongst supporters, but I think with Michael Voss as well, and trying to decide on the philosophy of the ruck position at Carlton. Is it 2? Is it 1? And we saw Vossi throughout various press conferences refer to this early in the season. And then, I've done a video on Tom a few weeks ago, and we saw, the highlights against Geelong, against the Bombers, and we really started seeing something really different. And he seems to have found a way most years since 2020 to just add a little bit more and more. And I think we've come to this critical point now where he is out of contract at the end of next year. He will be a free agent. He has interest. We saw some interest last year.
Well, Jim, the trade space never sleeps and it's already heating up. One man who will be in demand is Carlton's Tom De Koning. Already interest from Sydney, Geelong, where his brother Sam plays, and of course St Kilda, where the list boss at the Saints, Stephen Silvani, was actually the man who drafted De Koning originally to Carlton. So he will be a one to watch this year.
So if you look at it now, you've got those three clubs in particular. So, you've got, let's say Sydney, they now have Brodie Grundy. He signed a pretty big extension in 2019. I believe it was a $6 million deal for 7 years, something like that. That expires in 2027. So are Sydney going to still be interested by the time end of next year comes? I would say so. I would say their interest would still be there. St Kilda is another one that's been spoken about. Would their interest be there? Well, they've got Rowan Marshall, who's one of, if not the best rucks in the league. He's definitely in that top 3 conversation. So I don't know what the need is to pair the two of them together. It might be something that they look at. Geelong is the obvious one who you look at it and you say, yeah, they'll definitely be interested at the end of next year. And I think we'll be interested in Sam, maybe. They'll be interested in Tom. There's always been that little exchange between Carlton fans and Geelong fans around, who's going to get which brother. They might end up just staying at the same clubs that they currently are at anyway. But I would say that those 3 clubs in particular would still be interested. So let's get into the discussion part. I saw a really cool discussion between Sam Edmund and Kane Corns around Tom.
So De Koning, though, whose contract was for 2 years to coincide with free agency.
He's a bit more than a ruckman, though.
What do you think he's worth? What do you think Carlton are willing to pay? Clearly, it's going to be, if they get the commitment
there's
from
a
Tom,
walk-away price.
a long-term contract. This is a big...
Yeah, but there's a walk-away price. Once again, it's the similar discussion we were having around Tim English. I mean, at the start of last year, the numbers that were being floated for Tim English were extraordinary. And then by the halfway point, they're going, I don't reckon Tim English is going to get what he thought he was going to get. And he ends up staying for what we are told is a lot less. There is a ceiling on what ruckman can earn. And I wouldn't be going more than... I know a few years ago I said he's the next $1 million player, and he's definitely worth more because he can go forward and he can rest as a forward, which definitely helps, and he's important. But are you going to pay more than $800,000 for a ruckman?
So he's 25.
Are you going to pay more than $800,000?
Yep,
you are.
Yeah,
as a rival or as a Carlton?
I just think that's what he'll go for, whether it's at Carlton or whether
he's
it's
going to get
else.
More to leave. So
yeah, well, definitely more than 800
what's
at
the
Carlton.
staying price and what's the leaving price?
So what's the average wage now going forward? 400. Yeah, it'll eventually be 520. I think in the final year of the new CBA. So I think you've got to pay him more than 800, don't you?
I'd be nervous to pay him more than 800.
Interesting to note there, Corns' stance on being the $1 million player. This is something that he earmarked for Tom De Koning a couple of years ago. I remember thinking it was a bit outlandish, a bit brave. I think there's very few players worth $1 million. Well, sorry, I think most players should be getting paid $1 million or more personally, but in the context of the salary cap today, it's really hard to pay too many players $1 million or more. So there's that. And then there's the question, what do? You've got so many competing interests, given Tom's going to be a free agent, he's out of contract. There are a couple of clubs that would definitely, need his services. You've got his point of difference as a ruck, a guy that can seemingly get you 20 touches-ish as a ruck, so an extra midfielder. His follow-up efforts are great. His ability to create score launches from ruck hit-outs is something that definitely makes him a little bit different. It's that combination of athleticism and strength and now experience and putting it all together that makes him a really interesting prospect. So you've got circling clubs, you've got the free agency lure of financial incentives, you've got a Tasmanian team coming in. Is that the type of club that in a couple of years will throw a massive contract at him? So I wanted to ask you below, what's he worth? Now, right now I think he's worth more than he ever has been, given he's approaching that out of contract status. But let's look at the other side. So he still has growth to come. Now, I saw this really in-depth analysis by Jeff White, former ruck in the AFL. It was a great player. And just take a look at this.
Jumping. Now, I like what he does here. This is the first centre bounce of the game. Tries to sidestep him and then make it a jump, pretty much try and jump at him. And this is what Tom's got to get better at. What I would like to see from Tom is makes it really easy when he stands there, because Briggs can just come across. He hasn't got far to go. As you'll see in this clip here, look how quickly he comes across to negate him. And I love that Tom's still jumping into him, but you'll see in clips behind where he just takes his angle. This situation, when the ball is bouncing on your head, Tom's got to get his knee up to protect himself. It's not only to protect himself, but it's also to defend off his opponent. In this situation, he stands there, tries to put his hands out. I'd like him to get his left knee up and drive it right into Briggs's chest. Protect himself in that situation. Here, he's still in the same spot. So for Briggs, it's really easy to cut his angle. So what I would like to see in this situation is he starts there, but he comes around to make it a lot harder for Briggs to cut him off, and then he can run straight at him. In this situation, he makes it really easy for Briggs to come across and to cut his angle. And look at the line. There's so much space. He's in between De Koning and the ball, so it's easy for him to get the tap. But the same thing again, starts in the same position. It's really easy for Briggs to cut his angle, to stop him from jumping. I would like I would like De Koning to come around here and then go towards him that way. And then in the other, this is the best one of the night. You watch his footwork, really explosive. Briggs is still trying to cut across him, but because De Koning uses his quick feet, gets in the air, he's able to accelerate and jump into him. This is what we want to see more of. And he's got to use his angles and change more so than what he did the other night.
So we know what we know about Tom. We know he's already pretty good. We also know he's got some improvement left in him. And so I guess the question is, how do you balance the length of contract mixed with the yearly salary in a way that is going to entice him to stay, that's going to be secure for him long-term and short-term, knowing that opposition clubs will probably be able to offer more than what Carlton can. Oh, it'll never happen, but I would love to be sitting inside the negotiation table where that genuine conversation takes place and the back and forth happens. Now, I don't know if it happens in, one major sitting where you get the foundations of the deal done, and then obviously you've got some back and forth for finer details, but it's a really interesting one. I would say, given the context of what's happening around the league, we're seeing a lot of players get these contract extensions until, 2031. I think Mac Andrew comes to mind. Do I think Tom's worth a 5+ year contract? In the context of what we see around the league, in the context of what I've just mentioned about the competing interests, I do think it's a 5+ year deal. I'm not traditionally a big fan of long-term contracts. And the reason is you're one injury away from that being a bit of a liability. On the flip side, the longer term contract that you put in front of a player, the more your ability to retain value to them. So if, let's just say he wanted to leave in a couple of years' time and he's still got 2+ years remaining on his contract, well, then we'll be talking about a trade, then we're talking about retaining that value. So I'm a little bit torn. I think 5 years is the sweet spot, but I do understand why you give some of these up-and-coming players and hopefully stars of the competition. I understand why you give them long-term deals. And it is a bit of a loophole that is starting to emerge, and I think it's only one that'll become more and more debated as we go on. So in my mind, end of 2025, I think 5 years, get him to the end of 2030 and go from there. Now, the other interesting insight is there's always that discussion around, do you need a superstar ruck to win a flag? And I think the general consensus is no, you don't need a superstar ruck to win a flag. Now, is Tom going to be a superstar? Sky's the limit. I don't know. He could be. And so there is that. So there is going to be, as Kane Corns mentioned in his argument, there is a certain limit to how much you're willing to give up. Now, there is also the discussion that we heard with Jacob Wiedering when he was going through his negotiations around this pact that the boys have seemingly got to stick together, see out the premiership, and kind of go from there. So having seen all of this, having said all of that, in your view, what is a reasonable length of contract and, what's a reasonable salary range do you think for someone like Tom De Koning? I'm curious to see your pulse on things, both from a Tom De Koning's contract point of view and also just a broader question around length of contracts. And we'll see where this discussion takes us. I'll chat to you soon.